The call came at 2:17 in the morning. Riz Harmon had been awake. Rise. Her voice was wrong. Not broken. Lennox Caldwell did not break easily, but there was something beneath his name in her mouth, something she was working very hard to control. Something is wrong. I don't know if it's the baby. I called the doctor, but I can't. He was already moving. Don't move. I'm coming. Keep talking to me. He was in his car in 4 minutes. He kept her on the phone the entire way across the city, his voice steady and certain, while something behind his sternum was doing something he did not have clinical language for. He was very good at keeping calm, but he was not good at it tonight. She was on the floor of her living room when he arrived, back against the sofa, one hand pressed to her side, and pain written all over her face. Lennox Caldwell was at her absolute limit. He crossed the room in 3 strides and was on his knees beside her before he'd made any conscious decision to do so. How long has it been like this? An hour. Maybe more. I didn't want to. You didn't want to call. Not a question. She looked at him. I didn't know who else. Don't, he said. Quiet. Certain. You don't have to explain it. Let's go. He got her to the hospital in 11 minutes. He was the one who spoke to the nurses at admitting. Her name, her weeks, her symptoms. Because she was in too much pain to find words, and he had her information the way he had everything about her. Completely, by heart. The admitting nurse, not looking up from her chart, asked the question, Father, right? Rise opened his mouth. Lennox's hand found his in the pain. Her fingers locked around his with the grip of someone reaching for the one solid thing in a tilting world. She was eyes closed, breathing the way they'd told her to breathe. He looked down at her hand around his. He did not correct the nurse. For Lennox, the pain came in waves, and between the waves there was Riz. His voice, his hand, and somewhere in the space between one wave and the next, her mind went backward to 6 months ago. Lennox Caldwell was 30 years old, and she was good at 2 things above everything else. The first was architecture, and the second was holding herself together. She had been doing it for so long she no longer noticed the effort. It was 11:15 on a Thursday evening. Her drafting table was lit. Derek, her husband, had been in Dubai for 9 days. Before Dubai, it was Seoul. Before Seoul, it was Chicago. And before Chicago, there had been a week at home where he occupied the apartment like a piece of furniture, present, functional, and entirely without warmth. She was alone, and she had stopped thinking about it. Derek Ashford was 38 years old, and he was, by every external measure, exceptional. The private equity firm he had inherited from his father, and rebuilt from the inside out, was valued at just over $800 million. He was not cruel to Lennox. That was the thing she had turned over in her mind during the long, quiet evenings of the past year, trying to make sense of the feeling that her marriage had become a room with the windows sealed shut. He did not insult her. He did not belittle her. He was not unkind. He simply did not require her. She had understood this gradually. The calls that came less and less frequently. The evenings home that he spent on his phone, present in body only. His attention always somewhere else. The women, she had discovered later, were part of his logic, not love. Just logistics. He traveled constantly. He had needs. The women on the road were disposable, and entirely separate from his marriage in his mind. Lennox was his wife. The others were something else. To Derek, these categories were clean. She found a photograph. It was in a shared cloud account she had nearly forgotten they had, set up years ago for a vacation and never dismantled. The account was mostly empty. A few folders from the early years. And then a folder she didn't recognize, synced automatically from Derek's phone, unlabeled. She opened it. She looked at the photograph for a long time. A woman. A hotel room in what looked like Milan from the window behind them. Derek's hand on her shoulder with the comfortable ease of someone who has done this before. Smiling. Relaxed in a way he had not been relaxed at home in longer than she could remember. She closed the app. She sat at her drafting table, and she thought about the way grief can become a waiting room. About the fact that she had been sitting in it for a long time, waiting for something to tell her she was allowed to leave. Here it is. She did not cry. She made tea and made a decision. She was going to need a lawyer. 6 weeks later, on a Wednesday morning before Derek had returned from wherever Derek was, Lennox sat on the edge of her bathtub at 6 o'clock and looked at a positive pregnancy test. Her first thought was not about Derek. It was, I am going to love this person so much. She pressed her hand flat against her stomach. 8 weeks, maybe 9. Nothing showing. Nothing yet that the world could see. Her second thought arrived on the heels of the first, just as clear. Derek cannot know. Not until I have done what needs to be done. Because the decision was no longer just about her. She was not going to raise her child inside Derek's architecture. She was not going to let her baby learn that this was what love looked like. What marriage cost. What a man was. She had been planning to leave. Now she had a reason that had nothing to do with her own pain. She called Riz Harmon's office that morning and made an appointment. Riz Harmon was not what she had expected. She had expected someone older. The name on the referral card her colleague had pressed into her hand had the weight of a reputation behind it. Meticulous, she'd been told. Strategic. He doesn't lose. She had pictured someone silver-haired, deliberate. The particular kind of authority that comes from decades of practice. He was 37. He listened to her presentation without interrupting. She laid out her situation. The evidence, the marriage timeline, the assets she was aware of, the outcome she was seeking. With the organized calm of a woman who had been rehearsing this for 6 weeks and intended to feel nothing during it. He asked precise, intelligent questions. He made notes. He did not offer sympathy or outrage or any of the performative responses she had been braced for. At the end of the meeting, as she was closing her folder, he asked a question that was not on any intake form she had ever seen. Is there someone who can be with you? She stopped. She looked at him. I'm fine on my own. He held her gaze for a beat longer than professionally necessary. Not invasively. Just with an attention that felt different from everything that had come before it in the past hour. Like a door opening in the wrong direction. I know you're fine, he said. But you shouldn't be alone this period. She was 9 weeks pregnant. Nothing showed. Her coat was still on. She had not told him. Had not told anyone. And yet something in the way he looked at her belly had the quality of someone who could see the whole picture. He had noticed. She didn't answer. She thanked him and left. In the elevator, alone, she stood very still with her hand against her stomach and tried to identify what she was feeling. It took her the entire ride down to the lobby to name it. He saw me. Her husband had not seen her in longer than she could remember. And a man she had known for 55 minutes had looked at her across a conference table and understood something about her that lived beneath the surface. She walked out and told herself it meant nothing. He was perceptive. It was his job to be perceptive. It meant nothing at all. She told herself this for several weeks. She got better at it, and then she got worse. The months that followed were 2 stories running simultaneously, the way parallel tracks run, close enough but never touching. The first story was the case. Rise built it with the methodical thoroughness of a man who understood that precision was a form of protection. She provided documents. He prepared strategy. They met twice a month in his office and once a week by phone, and the meetings were professional and focused, and entirely appropriate. The second story lived in the margins of the first. It lived in an evening call that was supposed to be 30 minutes and ran to an hour and 10. It lived in the way he handed her water before she asked for it in every meeting, without comment, without making it a thing. It lived in what she did not know about him yet, and what she was beginning to sense anyway. That Rise Harmon carried something. That the meticulous control of every response was not just professional. She had not asked. He had not offered. But the shape of it was there, in the silences, as though he understood from the inside what it cost to be standing where she was standing. She was 4 months along when she told him. They were in his office. She had been sitting across the table from him for 40 minutes when she simply said it. "I'm pregnant. I think you know already, but I thought I should formally say it, before the meetings change." He went still, trying very hard to maintain a feigned ignorance, and she watched his face do a quick, private recalibration, the professional composure reasserting itself over something that had moved across his features, too fast to read. He asked the right questions. The practical ones. Healthcare, timeline, whether the pregnancy changed anything about the financial structure of the case. He was thorough, and he was careful, and he was everything she was paying him to be. Then he asked what she needed him to do. She appreciated that. She also noticed what it cost him to stay on the right side of the line. There was one moment, when she stood to leave and put on her coat, and he held the door. Which he always did, the small courtesies were always there, steady and unremarked upon. And for just a second, his hand was near her shoulder without touching it. The space between them had the quality of something held very carefully. Something that would change its nature completely if it were set down. Then she stepped through the door and he let her. Derek came home in November. 4 days between a Tokyo acquisition and a Miami conference. He walked into the apartment with his phone in his hand and his coat still on, and Lennox was at the kitchen counter making dinner, and he was halfway to the bedroom before he stopped. She was 5 months pregnant. She had been wearing loose things at home and structured things outside, and had been telling herself there was no particular reason for this that required examination. Derek turned around slowly. He looked at her stomach, then at her face, then back at her stomach, with the expression of a man encountering a variable he did not account for. Not grief, not tenderness, not the shock of a man who understands he has missed something enormous. More like the rapid calculation of someone running numbers. When? Not a question. An accusation dressed as one. 5 months, she said. She kept her voice even. She had been preparing for this moment, and she had decided she would give him nothing he hadn't earned. Is it? He stopped himself. But the sentence was already in the room. She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about 5 years of marriage. About the vineyard in Connecticut he had described on their 3rd date with more warmth than she'd heard from him since. About the man she had believed him to be and the man he had shown himself to be, and the distance between those two men, which she had spent years trying to close, and which had turned out to be the entire distance between what he had offered and what she had need. "You don't get to finish that sentence," she said quietly. "And you don't get to have this conversation with me. Not tonight. Not without lawyers present." He stared at her. "Lennox, I've retained counsel. You'll hear from them next week." She put her fork down. She picked up her plate. She walked to the living room and sat down and turned on the television and did not look at him again. Derek Ashford stood in his own kitchen for a long time. Then he picked up his phone. He made a call she couldn't hear and left for the hotel 40 minutes later. She sat with her plate on her lap and the television on and her hand on her stomach and thought, almost done. The first divorce meeting was on a Thursday in December. 6 months along. Lennox dressed with the deliberate composure of a woman who understood that the way she walked into a room was itself a form of testimony. She arrived 4 minutes early because she had never been late to anything important in her life, and she was not going to start today. Rise was already there. He was always already there. He stood when she came in, just the instinct of a man whose regard for someone shows in his habits. And she took the chair beside him and placed her folder on the table and looked at the door and waited. They came in together. Derek. His lawyer Crane, young and brittle in the specific way of men who confuse sharpness with intelligence. And beside Derek, with her own quiet composure and her hand not quite touching his arm, Rose Ellison. Lennox had seen photographs of Rose. She had not expected to see her here. She registered the choice putting her in this room, on this day, and filed it under the long list of things Derek did. We can begin. Derek's ugliness did not arrive as cruelty. It never did. It arrived as something more insidious. He questioned the timing. He used language that made Crane shift in his seat and made Rose go very still beside him. He implied, in the careful way of men who know how far they can go, that the pregnancy was a strategic convenience, a move, something designed to complicate the proceedings in Lennox's favor. Rise was looking at his documents when Derek said it. He did not look up, but his jaw tightened, and then it released, and he was composed again. He let Lennox answer, because she did not need him to intervene, and he knew it, and respecting that was its own form of protection. And she answered, plainly, precisely, without heat. She had prepared for every version of this, and she delivered the response that left no surface for Derek's implication to land on. Crane attempted a follow-up. Rise redirected. The rhythm of the room shifted, and Derek, for the first time in any room Lennox had ever watched him occupy, was not setting the temperature. She felt the specific relief of a thing long anticipated finally arriving. She had been afraid of this room for months, and now she was here, and she was fine. She was more than fine. The meeting broke for a short recess. Crane needed to make a call. Derek stepped into the hallway, phone already at his ear. Rise excused himself briefly, and for 90 seconds, Rose and Lennox were the only two people in the conference room. The silence between them had the texture of something that needed to be said. Rose spoke first. Her voice was carefully controlled. How far along? 6 months. Rose looked at her hands on the table. Long fingers. A ring Lennox had not noticed before. He told me you were cold, Rose said. Not accusatory. Almost flat. That you'd been distant for years. That the marriage had been empty for a long time. That he was staying for appearances only. Lennox said nothing. She let it sit in the room. He told me I was different, Rose continued. That what we had was different. That when the time was right. She stopped. Something moved through her expression that had nothing to do with composure. I didn't know about the baby. He didn't tell me. Lennox looked at her. You should suddenly not feel apologetic about my baby. You should be sorry for getting involved with a married man. Deception is inevitable, since that was how you found each other. I know, Rose said simply, and nodded. One short movement. Something was settled between them in that moment that required no more words. When Derek came back through the door, he found 2 women with expressions that told him nothing and eyes that told him everything. He didn't know how to read it. That, Lennox thought, was the most Derek thing about him. The meeting ended without resolution. Derek's team introduced a complication. Asset disclosure issues that Rise had anticipated and was prepared to dismantle. But not today. Not with the incomplete documentation Crane had brought. A second date was set. Rise walked Lennox to the elevator. They stood waiting for it in the quiet of the 14th floor corridor, away from the conference room, and the lawyers and Derek's watching eyes. You did well, he said. She looked at him. He was looking straight ahead at the elevator doors. Professional. Correct. Everything in its proper place. Don't do that, she said. He glanced at her. Don't say it like it's a case note. You know what I mean. A beat. He looked back at the elevator doors. I know what you mean. The elevator arrived. She stepped in. She turned and he was still standing in the corridor, and for one moment, just one, the professional distance between them became visible as a choice rather than a fact. Something that was being maintained, deliberately, by both of them, with effort. The doors closed. Lennox stood in the elevator and looked at her reflection in the brushed metal doors and thought about a man who noticed things he wasn't supposed to notice and felt things he wasn't supposed to feel and handled both with a discipline that was increasingly indistinguishable from sacrifice. She put her hand on her stomach. Her baby she had already named Jude moved. A small, rolling pressure, the particular sensation she had come to love above almost everything else. The reminder that she was not alone in her own body. I know, she said quietly, to him, to herself, to the child she was already in conversation with. Me too. 3 weeks after the first meeting, Rose called. Lennox almost didn't pick up. She was on her sofa at 9 in the evening, feet up, and she looked at the number and remembered the conference room and the short, careful conversation and the particular recognition in Rose's face, and answered, I found something, Rose said. No preamble. I want you to understand why I'm telling you. It's not sympathy and it's not guilt. I went back through his study because I was angry, and I intended to find something, and I did. What did you find? Rose described it with the organized precision of someone who had spent several days thinking about how to present it. Asset transfers. Made 11 months ago. Before the divorce proceedings had been formally initiated, but after. Rose noted without inflection. Derek had known about the marriage's trajectory. A Delaware holding company registered in the name of Philip Crane, Derek's own lawyer. The company had received a significant transfer from Derek's personal account. Not the firm, personal. And had been used since then as a shell to hold certain investments that had not appeared on any of the financial disclosures submitted to Lennox's legal team. He had moved money, before the divorce was official, through his own attorney, into a structure designed to make it invisible. I'm sending you the documents tonight. Do whatever you need to do with them. Rose, Lennox said. I know, Rose said, and hung up. Rise called at midnight. She had been waiting for it. She'd sent the documents at 10 and knew he would work until he understood them completely. She picked up and he said her name and launched immediately into what he'd found. What it meant, what it gave them. He was thorough and exact, and she could hear the particular intensity in his voice that was there when he was 3 moves ahead of everyone else and knew it. When he finished, there was a silence. Not an empty silence. The kind that has something in it. Are you all right? She almost said yes. The yes was right there, ready. The default response she had been giving for months. Lennox. Just her name. The way he said it when he was asking for real answer, not for the composed version of herself she presented to the world, but for what was actually there. She closed her eyes. I will be, she said. After it's done. I'll be fine. Silence. I'll be right there with you, he said. She almost said you don't have to. She stopped herself because it was not true, and because they both knew it. You're always there, she said instead. It came out quieter than she intended. It meant more than she intended. She heard him. Breathe, once, slowly. Good night, Lennox. Good night. She held the phone for a moment after the call ended. Then she set it on the nightstand. She lay in the dark and thought about it. She thought about a man who had been choosing her for 6 months without ever saying so. The call came at 2:17 in the morning. 3 weeks before her due date. 2 weeks before the finalization. She woke to pain that was not labor and she called her doctor. Voicemail. She called the after-hours line. On hold. She called Dana, her sister. Dana answered on the first ring, the way she always did, but Dana was in Portland. 3 time zones and a continent away, utterly, helplessly unable to close the distance. Go to the hospital, Lennox. Right now. Don't wait. I can't drive like this. I need... Call someone. Call anyone. Call. Dana stopped. There was a small silence in which the name neither of them said sat between them on the phone line, like an answer to a question Lennox hadn't asked out loud yet. She called Rise. Don't move. I'm coming. Keep talking to me. He was at her door in under 15 minutes. He got her to the hospital, and he spoke for her. He knew everything. Her name and her doctor and her weeks and her history. Her blood type, the name of the medication she'd been prescribed, the frequency of her prenatal appointments. He knew it all the way you know the things you have been paying careful attention to for months, because they matter. It was a placental complication, serious enough to require immediate monitoring and medication and a firm instruction that she was not to be alone. Not serious enough, the doctor told her, to require emergency delivery. But the baby needed to come soon, and the stress needed to stop, and she needed to sleep, and she needed to not be by herself for the next several days. The doctor delivered this information to both of them, in the room, without distinction. Rise stood at the foot of the bed with his arms crossed and asked the right questions. The medical ones, the practical ones, the ones she was too depleted to think of, and took notes on his phone. The doctor addressed her answers to both of them equally. When the doctor left, Lennox looked at Rise across the room. He looked back at her. She wanted to say something. She did not have words yet for what she wanted to say. It was too large and too new, and she was too tired, and the pain medication was making the edges of everything soft. But it was there, taking up space in the room, undeniable. Go home, she said. It's 3 in the morning, and I'm not going to sleep either way, he said as he took the chair in the corner. Riz. Lennox. A beat. Sleep. She slept. When she woke at 7:15, pale winter light coming through the hospital blinds, he was still there. He looked up when she stirred with an expression that he dismantled quickly, but not quickly enough. She had seen it. She would not forget it. He drove her home. He sat in her kitchen while she slept again, because the doctor had said not to be alone, and at some point, she did not know when, she heard the door close quietly, and he was gone. She lay in her bed in the thin winter morning and thought, 3 more days. Then it's done. Then everything changes. She was not thinking only about the divorce. She woke at 5 that morning. 38 weeks. She sat up slowly and took inventory. Was this it? She timed. The contractions were there, but distant, widely spaced. The body preparing, but not yet urgent. After the signing, she told her stomach, "We finish this first." Dana called at 5:45. "Tell me you're not going." "I'm going." Lennox Marie Caldwell. Dana. I have been building toward this day for 6 months. I am not going to miss it because my body decided to be dramatic. The contractions are 12 minutes apart. I have time. A long pause. You are the stubbornest woman alive. You've said that before. I'll keep saying it. Call me the second it's done. I will. And Lennox? Yeah. I love you. Whatever happens today. Lennox pressed her hand to her stomach. Felt Jude shift. I love you too. Now let me get dressed. She walked into the conference room at 9:53. 7 minutes early. She had timed the contractions in the elevator, still 12 minutes apart. She had time. She was going to do this. Rise was already there. He stood when she entered, and something moved across his face that he did not fully manage to conceal. The relief of a man who had spent 3 days being quietly, professionally terrified, and was now watching the person he'd been terrified for walk through the door under her own power. Composed, folder in hand, entirely herself. He pulled out her chair. He poured her water. He sat beside her and opened his folder and was everything she needed him to be. Derek was at the head of the table, his charcoal suit, his phone face down. He looked at Lennox when she came in. Really looked, the way he had not looked at her in years. And what was in his face was not the calculation from 5 months ago. Something else. Something that had been shifting over months of watching a woman he had failed to require build an entire world without him. He looked at Riz beside her. He looked at the water poured without asking. He looked at the infinitesimal positioning of Riz's body. Fractionally, protectively, constantly angled toward her. He looked like a man reading the final page of a book and understanding, for the first time, what story he had actually been in. The documents were presented. The Delaware company was on the table. Derek's team had no remaining leverage. Rise had ensured that methodically and completely over the past 3 weeks. Crane made 2 procedural objections. Rise addressed them with the efficiency of someone who had prepared for them before breakfast. Derek signed where he was told to sign. He did not look at Lennox while he did it. He looked at his own hand. Lennox signed last. 3 signatures. Her hand was completely steady. The notary stamped the final page. At 10:47 on a Tuesday in November, her marriage ended. She sat very still for a moment. Let it land. Not grief. She had grieved this long ago. What she felt now was cleaner. The feeling of a burden set down. She felt a contraction, stronger than the last. She breathed through it. Checked the time. She would not look at the clock during the signing, and so she did not know how long since the last one. 8 minutes. Okay, she thought. Okay. Now. They were moving toward the elevator. Rise beside her. Derek behind them. He had followed without being invited, some vestigial instinct pulling him in her direction the way it always had when he wasn't thinking. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped in. The doors began to close, and Lennox went still. The specific, absolute stillness of a body issuing an instruction that overrides everything else. Rise saw it before she said anything. He was already turning toward her, his hand at her back. Certain, unhesitating, the touch of a man who had done this before, who had been there at 2:17 in the morning and knew exactly what she needed and how to provide it. Rise. I know, he said. His phone was out. It's time, she said. And then, because she was Lennox Caldwell and she had been holding things together for so long, it had become instinct. The signing is done. He almost smiled. She saw it. The almost of it, the thing he was too focused to let through. Yes, it is, he said. I'll drive. Derek stepped forward. I'm her husband. I'll take her. The elevator was silent. Rise looked at him, not with anger. There was nothing hot in it. It was the look of a man stating a fact, quietly, to someone who needs to understand it. You're her ex-husband. As of 11 minutes ago. Derek's jaw tightened. That's my child. And I have her. Those words. Quiet as a door closing. Both men looked at Lennox. She was mid-contraction. Her eyes were half closed. She was breathing. The slow, controlled breathing of a woman who had been preparing for this and was executing it in spite of everything. Her hand was around Riz's. She had not been aware of reaching for it, but she had reached for it. Not as a statement, not as a choice made consciously, but as the body's truest answer to the question of what it needs. Her knuckles were white with the grip of it. She was not letting go. Both men were looking at her hand. Derek looked at it for a long time. He looked at Rise. He looked at Lennox's face. Eyes closed now, completely somewhere else. And at the hand that was not his hand, that had found its way to another man's with the certainty of something that had been true long before today. He stepped back. It was a small movement. One step. But it carried the weight of everything he was not going to say, and could not undo, and would have to carry forward. Rise did not acknowledge it. He was looking at Lennox. "With me," he said quietly, only to her. "Stay with me. We're going." At the hospital, the nurse at admitting looked up when they came through the door. She was the same nurse from 2 weeks ago. She recognized Rise and was already reaching for a wheelchair before Lennox had said a word. "Mr. Harmon," she said. "By name." "How far apart?" "6 minutes," Rise said. He knew because he'd been counting. Derek had followed them to the hospital. He walked through the doors 40 seconds behind them and moved with the authority of a man who had never failed to command a room. Then he saw them. He looked at Lennox's hand, still tightened around Rise. "Let him stay," she said to the nurse. 3 words, delivered through a contraction in a hospital corridor with less ceremony than a weather report. 3 words that closed the argument, ended the question, and told everyone in that room everything they needed to know about what the past 6 months had actually been. The nurse marked the chart. Derek stood in the corridor and did not move for a long time. Jude arrived at 4:22 in the afternoon. We won't narrate the hours between. Those hours belonged to Lennox, to her body and her will, and the extraordinary, ordinary miracle of a person deciding to enter the world. What we will say is that she was magnificent. What we will say is that Rise Harmon, who had built his entire professional identity around precision and restraint and the careful management of what he permitted himself to feel, stood in that room and felt everything and did not try to stop any of it. When the nurse placed Jude on Lennox's chest, the room went very quiet. He was small and dark-haired and outraged by the indignity of arrival in the way of all new people. And then the outrage subsided into curiosity, and he opened his eyes. Dark eyes. Lennox's eyes. She made a sound she had never made before. Not crying exactly. Or not only crying. The sound of something that has been held for a very long time finally being allowed to exist. "Hi," she said. "Hi, Jude. I've been waiting for you." He curled his fingers into small fists. His mouth opened. He was already the most complete thing she had ever seen. Rise was at the window. He had given her space the moment Jude arrived. Stepped back, given the room to her, the way he always gave her the room she needed. He was looking out at the city, his back to her, his shoulders doing something she had not seen them do in 6 months. "Rise," she said. He turned. She was looking at him over the top of Jude's head. Her eyes were wet. She was not trying to hide it. For the first time in this story, through every meeting and every late call and every moment of controlled composure under pressure, she let someone see her without the architecture. Just Lennox. Just this. He crossed the room and sat beside her. He did not reach for her. He let her set the distance. He looked at Jude with an expression she recognized now. She had first seen it in a conference room, 6 months ago, in the one unguarded second before he'd reassembled himself. The same expression. "He has your eyes," he said. She laughed. It came out soft and real and surprised. The laugh of someone whose body has decided, independent of any plan, that this is funny and good and worth the feeling. Jude, startled, scrunched his face, and then relaxed. "He does," she said. She looked at Riz, looking at her son. She thought about 55 minutes in an office on Park Avenue and a question that wasn't on any intake form. She thought, I have been being seen by this person since the beginning. I just needed to be ready to look back. She looked at him. He felt it, the shift, the quality of her attention. He turned from Jude to her. And there it was. No professional distance. No carefully maintained composure. Just two people in a hospital room with a sleeping newborn and 6 months of something that had been waiting patiently to be named. "I don't have words yet," she said. "You don't need them yet," he said. A beat. She was quiet for a moment, watching Jude sleep. Then, "The first day I came to your office," she said. "You knew, didn't you?" Before I said anything, he didn't answer immediately. She had learned that about him, that he gave real questions real time. "Yes," he said. "How?" He looked at Jude. Something moved through his expression. Not pain exactly, but the echo of it. The shape pain leaves behind when it has finished with you. "I spent 5 years wanting a child," he said. 5 years reading everything I could find. The way it changes a woman's body before anyone else can see it. The way she holds herself protectively without knowing she's doing it. The hand that goes to the stomach. A pause. I became a student of something I thought was coming. And then it didn't come. And then I understood why." He was quiet for a moment, but the knowledge stayed. "And when you reached across that table and your hand went to your stomach and came back just for a second, just that one movement, I knew." Lennox looked at him for a long time. "Your ex-wife," she said quietly. "She never wanted it." "No," he said. "She never did." The room held it. Outside, the city moved on in its indifferent, enormous way. "I'm sorry," she said, "that you learned to see it that way. That's what it cost you." He turned to look at her then, and what was in his face was not grief. Not anymore. It was something that had been through grief and come out the other side into something quieter and more durable. "I'm not," he said. "Not anymore." His eyes moved to Jude, then back to her. "It's how I saw you." Lennox closed her eyes, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt the specific, unfamiliar lightness of a woman who has put down what she was carrying. Not all of it. She would carry Jude forever. That weight was one she had chosen, and would choose again every morning for the rest of her life. But the rest of it, the years of being unseen by the person who was supposed to see her most, she put it down, and found that what was underneath wasn't emptiness. It was this.